I think it is a consumer right to know where is the source of their product, basically. It can be a sort of IKEA cup that they want to know where does it come from, and it can be energy, which is the sort of one of the most important products connected to the climate change, and then the sort of it is a sort of a cost for the consumers at the end as well.
Energy. So I mean, we could see last year when the price really peaked on guarantees of origin for renewables. A lot of Swedish electricity sales companies, they moved from selling renewable energy to fossil-free energy because the end consumers simply thought it was too expensive to buy renewable energy. It wasn't worth having it renewable, but it was worth having it fossil-free.
Hi everyone, Adam Karnama is here, and I'm happy to be joined by Mia Bodin today. The partner at Bodeke Partner is the company working closely with the important energy topics. And then today we are going to discuss more about the traceability of the energy and how we can make sure that we have the right type of information about how we use our energy and how much it is traceable. So I give the floor to you, Mia, to give a short introduction about yourself to our audience, and then what you work with and what you are passionate about as well.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Mia Bodin, Bodeke Partners. We are an independent advisory located in Sweden, in south of Sweden, close to Malmö and the bridge over to Copenhagen, and also in Gothenburg. We are advising mainly investors in renewable energy in the Nordic countries. So often pension funds and similar investment companies that invest in infrastructure projects. But so mostly large-scale wind power, solar power. Last year is also a lot of large-scale battery solutions and other storage solutions for electricity, but also working with the industry side, specifically new industry in hydrogen, power tech sector, data centers, and so on that want to use the renewable energy for their operations. So those are our main clients. We've been active about 8 years now, I think. Started the company about 8 years ago. Me and two colleagues from previous companies, so to say. So yeah, that's a bit of background, and currently also working quite a lot with policy issues. I mean, there's a lot going on, both of course in the EU and affecting also Sweden, but also in Sweden as a country itself, with the policies regarding perhaps financing new nuclear, lots of offshore wind power applications, and new policies regarding how to solve that and how to get all this new electricity production that we need for all the industry electrification that we see going on in all of Europe, of course, but also a lot in northern Sweden and northern Norway and Finland as well.
Exactly. Super interesting. And then yeah, I follow Bodeke and I see that you're supporting the industry in a great manner. And then yeah, we haven't expected to see a lot of sort of larger scale solar projects to be sort of invested in our sort of industry in Sweden, basically. So a lot of those are coming up, and then yeah, you play a key role to advising to have a right way to sell the electricity from the solar parks as well. So yeah, moving forward, I mean, connecting to those areas, I think that is always the traceability is an important element of that, both for the consumers. I think it is a consumer right to know where is the source of their product, basically. It can be a sort of IKEA cup that they want to know where does it come from, and it can be energy, which is the sort of one of the most important products connected to the climate change, and then the sort of it is a sort of a cost for the consumers at the end as well. I mean, we have ways to trace energy, basically, and then guarantee of origin is the important sort of element, or energy attribute certificates in that market that makes that traceable. But in your view, I think what is your perceptions of the ways that we currently make energy a traceable product? And then what is your general view about the guarantee of origin as a mechanism to make energy traceable for the corporates, and then eventually it is for the end consumers that they see that as well in their electricity bills or when they consume energy?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, there are of course alternative ways as well. You can look at the mix in the grid and correct that for imports, exports, and have a look at it on that way. And that's also, I mean, I think I'll come back to that as well in the Nordics and in specifically Norway. That's a big discussion on whether to do it that way or whether to actually use the geos. But I mean, that way you can only see it afterwards. So it's makes it quite difficult to choose in advance or to know in advance how much renewable electricity or how much fossil free or whatever it is that you want, or specifically if you even want to choose that I want electricity from this specific source or this specific country or even this specific asset. That's very difficult to do with alternative ways, so you do need some kind of certificate to do that. And I mean, the guarantees of origin is what the EU has chosen. Could of course be another type of certificate, but we have to have the same certificate in all of Europe to
Exactly.
make it traceable and to make it. And the guarantees of origin is working, and that's what the EU has chosen as the instrument to have traceability. So I think it's very crucial that we are able to trace where does the electricity that we use come from, and it becomes more and more important, not only for electricity. I mean, you can see that also when going to the grocery store, and that more and more consumers are requesting to actually see where does it come from, whatever I eat or use in electricity. So it's not specific for this sector, but in general. And industry and also, I mean, EU regulation and other demands are requiring more and more traceability and even closer and closer matching between what do I actually use and where does it come from. So it's
It's important.
getting more and more important, I would say,
Definitely.
also. And it makes sure that there is a balance. I mean, you know at least on an annual basis that you can't claim to have used more renewable electricity than it has actually been produced. So I mean, it's a way to make sure that there's actually balance, and it's a way for consumers and for industry to also say how much is it worth for me to have to use renewable energy instead of fossil free or instead of fossil energy. So I mean, we could see last year when the price really peaked on guarantees of origin for renewables. A lot of Swedish electricity sales companies, they moved from selling renewable energy to fossil-free energy because the end consumers simply thought it was too expensive to buy renewable energy. It wasn't worth having it renewable, but it was worth having it fossil-free. So they started purchasing nuclear geos instead. So the price of nuclear geos increased and the price of renewables decreased a little bit. So it's a way of consumers to say, I mean, how much is it worth for me to have it from this specific source or from
Yes.
even from this specific asset?
Exactly. Yeah, I think I will get the question to you about the prices and the way that things has been changed on the guarantee of origin prices. But then just before we just go there, on the basics that you mentioned about the market-based carbon reporting for the energy and then the location-based ways that you just look at the grid mix. What do you think? Is it a sort of a credible way to use energy attribute certificates, or you think that you see a sort of a momentum in the market that more and more companies, they want to look at the location base and look at the grid base sort of mechanisms? And what do you think the pros and cons could be there?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably do it in either way, but you have to do it in one in the same way, so to say,
Yes.
because otherwise there is this big risk of double counting. So I mean, if you want to have something that works in the whole of Europe, I mean, I personally think that the certificate way or the guarantees for origin way is the best way to do it. It's a market-based way of doing it, and as I said before, it's a way of consumers also to say how much is it worth and so on. So it gives a lot of advantages on that side, and it is of course I agree that it is a bit of a trend that also in some countries, some companies are looking to work also with the location-based system, but you can't do it at the same time as you have the guarantees of origin, because that makes a big problem, and that also destroys the credibility for both systems, really. So I mean, that has been a big discussion in Norway specifically. in the Nordics, where because of the high renewable mix in the grid, it's very easy to say that, well, we use renewable electricity here because the grid is renewable, but at the same time, all the wind farms and solar farms and so on, they export the GEOs from their production to other countries and to other industries in Germany, for example, and so they also claim the same renewable attributes. So that's of course that's a big problem, and it destroys the credibility for the GEOs. I think we need to choose one system, and GEOs, as I said before, is at least what the EU has chosen as the traceability system. So that is what we all should be using to avoid double counting. That's my view.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I've seen like corporates that they report on both and say that this is our mix for the location base and this is for the market base. But then, yeah, I agree with you that for the sake of clarity, I think that this market-based mechanisms that we have, they seems to bring much more sort of credibility. They are misfunctioning in the existing systems that we have for guarantee of origin. So, but then if we address them properly, maybe connecting to more granularity, that we will come to that sort of as well. So then I think that it will increase the trust of the consumers, both from the corporates and also in sort of consumers on that sort of policy and pushing that forward. But then let's connect this to prices. And I see that you mentioned about the demand on the renewable change when we had a spike on the prices of the renewable guarantee of origin. And then also you see this trend of like more customers, they think that maybe I just report on my location-based carbon reporting for the energy. And then we see a sort of extremely low prices for guarantee of origin during the last sort of at least year or at least some of the quarters, the last quarters. So what is your sort of view on this, such a volatility? I mean, it's a huge volatility that we see in the market. And then I don't want you to just forecast everything in the future for us as well, but what is your perception from the market?
As I said, there was a big peak last year, as we all know, and perhaps that peak came a little bit too fast. The prices increased very much, very quickly. And as I said before, at least in the Nordics, consumers were not willing to pay that price for having it renewable. Then they moved towards fossil free and so on. We also saw big corporates, not only because of the price, it was also other issues, but moving towards more fossil free than renewables, and of course something to do with the price as well, probably. So that was probably a little bit too quick a movement, so to say, and after that we've seen prices go down. One reason is of course the lower that the demand went down when the price increased, but also of course the continued rapid development of new renewables also within Europe. So of course that has also helped pushing the prices down. We do have a big electrification phase in front of us. Maybe it is a little bit slower than we thought a year or two ago, and there are other profitability challenges and other challenges that grid challenges and so on that has made this trend go a little bit slower than we hoped for. But at least we do have a lot of industry that needs to do something about their fossil fuels usage and their carbon emissions. So they will need to electrify to different extents. So we will have an increase of renewable usage or renewable power usage, and thereby also demand of guarantees of origin. So I definitely see that we should be seeing increasing prices, but maybe we thought it would go a little bit faster than it has done. So it might be a little bit. I mean, we do see the development of production growing faster than the consumption side, and I think that will change, but it takes a little bit longer than we thought.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. So you think that $1 million question, that next quarters we will see increase in the price of guarantee of origin, or what is your perspective?
I would probably think it might remain around the same levels for a little bit longer than that, but more longer term, I definitely think we will see higher prices, but it might not be next quarter. It could be in a year's time or something.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I see that Yeah, is a lot of sort of volatility in the prices, like 10 times changes of the prices, or I think those are the things that the consumers doesn't like, and it doesn't sort of support the way that we want to run a stable market and something that creates value for our society and in the environment as well. But you mentioned like a couple of times about the EU regulation, and then the sort of the benchmark regulation that we always refer to is the RED, Renewable Energy Directive. So we have had three of them lately. So the last one was published last year, and
Yes.
and then connecting to that, where do you see the sort of the role of energy like traceability and guarantee of origin market is changing, and what is your sort of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is becoming more and more clear for every directive that is published, and also for the third one, then that the traceability and the guarantees of origin is getting more and more important, and also that it's encouraged to have production and consumption more closely matched to each other. In the Renewable Energy Directive, it's still not a requirement to have more matching, so to say, than the geos and on an annual basis and so on. But it's definitely encouraged in it in lots of texts that wasn't there before. And I think it even in the latest ones says that the member states should encourage, where it's possible at least, to have timestamps that are closer to a real-time relationship between consumption and production. So it's not really a requirement still, but it's definitely have new texts on encouraging it, on encouraging more granularity and more traceability and more transparency and so on. So that I think is clear throughout that document. But then of course there are other documents that are connected to the Renewable Energy Directive that makes it even clearer. So we have delegated acts that are coming, and one of them is for renewable fuels, for example, the delegated acts for RFNBOs, as they call it, but for renewable fuel production of renewable fuels. And in that delegated act, there are more specific criteria on not just using GEOs, but to really have a more closer relationship. So it adds, for example, requirements on additionality, on having specific that you need to purchase renewable electricity within the same from production facilities within the same bidding zones as where you have your consumption. It imposes, at least in some years' time, to have a monthly matching, and even after 2030 an hourly matching. So it adds more specific requirements and details on those type of things than the Renewable Energy Directive does in itself.
Exactly. So yeah, that's invaluable insight. Thanks for sharing, Mia. So that's exactly so to the point. I wanted to catch up before we just go to the PPA conversations and then connect it to that on this additionality topic. So can you just give us a bit of insights? Do you think that intrinsically GOOs they cover additionality, or do we need extra type of push for the additionality of the GOs? What are your views on that?
I don't think the geos in itself really adds much on the additionality. In some way, it's because the validity is only 12 months on it, so it does have some kind of close. I mean, you can't claim to have used electricity generation or production that was produced 3 years ago, and you use that this year. You can't do that because of the shorter validity time of the geos. So that's a good thing that makes it at least a little bit more connected, so to say. But when it comes to really encouraging new wind farms, in a way it does help, because it gives, issuing geos, it gives an additional income to the wind farm. So in that sense, it of course helps or supports for more wind and solar to be built, because it adds a revenue stream to it. So in that sense, it kind of helps additionality in one way, but of course it's not really enough to really support additionality. So I think, but in that sense, you have, as we will speak about later on, we do have the PPAs and also in the delegated acts, which probably will come for even for more sectors as well in the future. Maybe for all industry sectors, we'll have some kind of delegated act, and through these type of regulations, you can of course also support additionality question when you say that to use or to claim the renewable aspect, you need to purchase the electricity from facilities that are maximum 3 years old or 2 years old or something like that. But then we need also to remember that it might be very, very important now with additionality because we need to have more power built out, but that might not be the case in 10 years time or in 20 years time or something like that, and it would be quite bad if we would always have to only to be able to use electricity produced from new facilities, because also the old ones will need, you should be able to at least use the geos should be worth something also connected to already existing wind farms, so you can't really go for the additionality all the time in the future.
No, no, no. I mean, there is a point that we get to some saturation, and then yeah, there should be some sort of shift on that. But then
Yeah.
now I think that that's great to hear from you that you feel like we need to have a bit of more push on additionalities of the guarantee of origins, and then we have some aspects of that covered already, which I agree. And then, but I think that additionality is always an important issue connecting to guarantee of origins, or if it is a carbon credit. So those are the sort of important elements inside that conversation. Moving to PPAs, and I know that PPA is something probably very close to your main sort of daily work activities. And then we always have guarantee of origin as an important element of a PPA conversation, not always included in many aspects. But what is your sort of view in connection with the guarantee of origin in your PPA conversations? Does the do the investors really think that this is a revenue stream that they can rely on? And does it affect on the return on the investment that you calculate from the like power plants that they come, and then what role they play in your PPA conversation with the investment funds that you discuss with?
First of all, yes, PPA is of course one big part of our discussions with the investors, but it's one way of hedging the power price or the revenue, the power production revenue side, so to say. So there are different ways of doing that. So the main purpose of PPAs is of course to have a kind of long-term hedge that you might be difficult to do on the financial markets because of the low liquidity further out in time. So, but we generally advise some kind of mix of also standard financial contracts and PPAs. But PPAs is one way of hedging long term, and that's of course the difference also between PPAs and GEOs. That PPAs are used mostly for power price hedging purposes, while the GEOs are used for really guaranteeing the origin of where does the electricity come from. So guarantees of origin is of course one part of the adding an additional revenue stream. So that's very important. All the revenue streams are really needed to have new wind farm. The costs have increased as well on building a bit in the last year. So it's every revenue stream is needed, and the GEOs are of course one part of that. That's generally included, but it really depends on. For a power producer, you have two alternatives. You can always sell your GEO, so you can either sell it together with the power price in a PPA, for example. But if the industry that you connect with are not really interested in the traceability or in the renewable energy claim, they are just wanting to hedge their price, then you can sell the GEOs in a different contract. So for the power producer, it doesn't really matter whether it's included in the PPA or not. In some way, you might even get a bit better paid if it's not included. So you can have the PPA in one contract, and then you can have the GEO in a separate contract. Otherwise, it's generally added, but it might be added at a little bit less, a little bit lower price if you include it in the PPA itself. But in general, when you connect with a corporate, if you want to do a corporate PPA where you in general get better prices than doing it with a utility, then the corporate wants PPA. So that is of course the first question we would ask to a corporate are you interested in the renewable traceability, the GEOs, or not? And most, I would say, are. I mean, it's kind of expected that when you sign a PPA with a wind farm or a solar farm, then you will have the GEOs included as well. Otherwise, you can't really claim that you actually purchase the power from this wind farm or a specific asset. So, but as was discussed before as well, if you do use the locational based reporting, you might still say that, well, I do use renewable electricity because I'm connected to this grid, so I don't need to purchase the guarantees of origin. And as I said, it's not really a problem for the power producer because they can just sell GEOs to someone else. But it's, of course, a question mark whether that's double counting then because then they will be sold and yeah, more corporates will use the same. But it's not really, I mean, that's up to the corporate today to kind of, the guarantees of origin is still not mandatory. So of course it's up to how you do your reporting and what you claim there. It's a bit different for the ones that are affected by the delegated acts, because it of course makes it a little bit clearer there what is needed and not. So you might not have the same choice there.
Exactly. Yeah, is a great insights. Thanks for sharing, Mia. And I agree. I mean, we are talking about voluntary carbon markets related to guarantee of origin. And then, yeah, we need to keep that in mind. This is still a voluntary market.
Yes.
I haven't seen any sort of corporate not to do that, or very a small number of them, they avoid to do that. But it still is a voluntary, but widely accepted to be the sort of the standard of the markets to do.
Yeah, and I think it might depend a little bit on which country you are as well. And I think it is a bit of a difference when you come, for example, in Norway and northern Sweden, where you have such a high renewable mix in the grid. Then of course there are corporates that are using the grid mix and then not wanting to purchase the guarantees of origin because they don't really feel that they just need it to claim renewable. So of course but I think whereas in countries in Southern Europe or so on, where you have or in countries where you have a lower renewable mix in the grid, then it's quite obvious that you need to purchase the guarantees of origin, and that is definitely going to be included in a PPA, in any kind of PPA that you do. But I think it's through the PPAs where you can have the more additionality criterias, and you can have different different criterias on that specific asset, and should it be new, and how should you purchase the power? Should you purchase everything? Should you purchase just part of it? And if should it be on a daily basis reporting and so on. So in the PPA contract you have a lot more flexibility on how to do it than you do on the guarantees of origin. So in general, it's in the PPA contract where you decide all these details, and then you have the guarantees of origin to make sure that the annual balance is correct, and that you don't use on an annual basis more than you use than it's produced from this specific wind farm. So they add to each other and they complement each other pretty good. And I think the guarantees of origin will probably be even more important or used, so to say, when we move over to monthly matching instead of annual and so on. Then that will make them even more credible and used.
Yes, we are. I think well connected to this conversation about granularity, but then just setting the market environment with different players that we have in this environment. I mean, we have investors, they invest. We have corporate wars that they either buy directly from their utility, their type of electricity and guarantee of origin, and they hedge the prices by buying the PPAs. But then there will be a sort of existing guarantee of origins that needs to be traded. So there will be a sort of a surplus that needs to be traded. And this connects to our sort of spiritual platform, that we have a sort of the marketplace, that we make the transactions of the guarantee of origin to be a smoother way. We support also with the way that we can make more granular certificates as the market is getting developed. And then the software integration of the guarantee of origin purchases connected to traceability, to sustainability reporting, or energy procurement side as well. But then in this environment, how do you see the market, the different players are changing their role in terms of do we need a sort of more central systems to manage the guarantee of origin? And we have Swedish Energy Agency, for example, that is the registry system, but it's still the trade is happening somewhere else, and then there will be a sort of a trade of that. But then do you think that we need a bit of more centralized system, like what we manage for stocks, for example, that, for example, Nasdaq is managing? Or do you believe that there should be even more decentralized in your view, that environment of the guarantee of origin?
Yeah, I mean, it's disadvantages and advantages with both sides, of course, but I think maybe to make it a bit even more credible system and really used by everyone in the same way, and for the EU to really put criterias on the GEOs in its regulation, they also need to make sure that it's done in a standardized way. So in that sense, I think it will be important to have more transparency, at least, than we do now. If that's through different decentralized platforms that are sending in reports, but I think the transparency is really important. So even if it's one, it could be one platform that makes it very transparent, of course, like to have a Nasdaq OEX or something like that. But it could also be more decentralized. But it would require more standardization and more transparency for it really to be the system that is used by everyone, and for EU to be able to put these kind of demands and requirements on that everyone needs to use it, because you can't really regulate and make it mandatory unless you know that it's actually going to be accessible for everyone in every country and so on. So it really, you would need to make sure that everyone can access this to reasonable prices and with reasonable liquidity. And if it's done in very different places, you might not be able to guarantee liquidity of the products and so on. And I mean, now we see that some countries have moved to issuing monthly guarantees of origin. Some countries still have, or most countries still have, annual issuance, and in some countries it's quite expensive to buy from this location and so on. So it is still very decentralized, and maybe a little bit too decentralized and too intransparent for it to really be a system used by everyone. So something definitely needs to be more standardized. And I think consumers are also, industries are more and more looking into having a closer relationship between when you actually use the electricity and when you don't. So all these kind of systems that you also offer, where you can actually trace it on lower granularity, and really that's going to be very important going forward, and to actually really see where it comes from every minute, or at least every hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though I'm a bit skeptical to really having it on an hourly basis in a too near future. I think that can create a lot of problems to put that demand also on industry.
Yeah, but yeah, let's expand on that. So I think about the decentralized and centralized system. So what I'm hearing from you is like that it doesn't matter to be centralized or decentralized. We need a transparent system. Yeah. We need a sort of something stable, and we need something that is just commonly accepted by everyone around this sort of, if it is European Union, or if it goes to REC, for example, for the stakeholders that are involved on that environment, which makes a lot of sense. But connecting to this granularity issue, I think that, I mean, we need to make the central system to be stronger and more transparent, and decentralized systems that they are managing the whole transactions, they should be also more transparent, and then there should be more sort of supporting the consumer needs basically in the market. Granularity, it has been a sort of a big topic in the industry that has been discussed, and a lot of solutions, different conversations. We see that sort of the speed of change probably is a bit less than many expected, but still we see a movement in RED 3, as you mentioned. There is more sort of push for more granularity, maybe not hourly from day one. But you mentioned that this will make challenges in the short term if that's sort of being pushed. So love to hear about you on that granularity and the challenges that they might come.
Yeah, we are already starting looking at that for several clients, specifically within the hydrogen power techs industry, and mean, they are seeing this demand that it will be required an hourly matching when they are entering into PPA contracts. So already now, when closing or signing PPA contracts, they are looking into analyzing, if we would make a PPA contract with this specific wind farm, and maybe the specific wind farm plus solar farm or something like that, how many hours of the production how many hours where we produce hydrogen or power to X would we actually receive power from this wind and solar farm? And making those kind of analysis, we do realize that it is difficult to have that need for an hourly matching between production and consumption, because it would need to, well, the hydrogen producers, they would either need to be extremely flexible in their production, so to say, so they would need to accept either that we need to shut down when there's no wind or solar from these farms, or to produce grey hydrogen or something like that, like not green energy. So they need to find an off-taker that will be willing to also accept a part grey hydrogen instead of green hydrogen, or they would need to sign PPAs with a lot of wind farms and a lot of solar farms to really make sure that they have the power that they need every single hour. But that would also mean that they would have to take a big price risk, because in many hours they would have far too much instead. So they would need to sell that back to the market. And that's of course completely possible. I mean, you can do that. You can just sell it back to the market through your balancing responsible party or something. But it will give you a very high price risk. So it will be hard to get profitability in those electrolyzers. And currently you could of course shut the electrolyzers down at that point. And so, but that in today, or at least with the current costs of electrolyzers, that's not going to be profitable. You need to actually run them at least for 6,000-7,000 hours a year for it to be profitable enough. So currently it does create a bit of problems, and if everyone would really close PPAs with too much power, then of course PPAs would not be available for everyone, because everyone will have signed up, the ones that are first will have signed up for all the wind farms and solar farms that are available. So I think currently are the advantages really bigger than the disadvantages of having an hourly matching. I think a monthly matching would be good enough now, and maybe in 10 years time, when we have storage solutions and hydrogen storage solutions together with battery storage solutions and more aggregations and cooperations, then it might be possible. But and of course, I mean, the EU does say that it's not needed until 2030, but even so, if you close a PPA today, that PPA will be valid until 2035, like normally 10-year PPA or even 15-year PPA that you close today. So you will already today, you need to take that into account when closing the PPA. So it does create a bit of problem already today that it's in the requirements that it's needed after 2030.
Exactly. And then, yeah, I agree with you. I think that in that sense, it's good to bring the insights. I think many customers that we discuss, we find out that they don't know how much of their consumption is matched with the generation. Is it like 50%? Is it 20%? Or is it like 80%? So I think that insight should be there, and it just make a shift when everyone realizes that, oh, there is a gap here that we need to address. But then I agree that the awareness of seeing the gap and understanding that there is a sort of an issue that we need to address is low. And then probably that's how our tool can support to bring that insight. So you see that. So it's not obligatory that you buy everything 100% match, because yes, as you said, is a huge cost. And almost impossible to make it like 100% solar, for example.
Yes.
Because that's not going to happen. Yeah.
No, but it's really important to see and to understand what the match is like, because that's the only way that we're going to get cost-effective solutions to solve it and to close that gap, or at least reduce the gap. As you said, I don't think we'll be able to close it completely, but at least we have already seen, when doing this analysis and showing the client that, okay, this is the match, and in general it is a bigger gap than it's expected or than they think. So it's a bit of a shock first when you see that gap, but understanding that it's okay, well, then how should we solve it? And that might mean that you need to have a better portfolio of several wind farms in different locations together with solar farms. You might need to invest in some kind of storage, either at the wind solar farm or yourself, or you need to think about other solutions. So I think if we have that awareness and that understanding, and if that's broader understanding, as to say, then that will also support new investments where it's needed to have a more of a better balanced system in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And then just having an insight, I think, is eye-opening for many. I think that is not an issue that many has been thinking about, but then from the data perspective, technology solution to be in place, I think everything can happen pretty fast. But then we need to have the basis of understanding among the stakeholders involved, and then see, yeah, close the gap gradually. I think that a fast changing type of approach will not make a sustainable change as we want to have, and then that requires time and a lot of sort of discussions and awareness increasing basically to make that happen. I can't enjoy more the conversation that we have had. So very insightful, great things that you shared with us from your daily activities that you do, and super invaluable, I'm sure, to me myself that I learn, and then also I'm sure the audience that we will listen and get the insights from this. Final sort of thoughts or thinking on the issue of the traceability for the different stakeholders that are involved, and maybe a small advice. So would love to hear on your final thoughts.
I think we've discussed quite a lot of it, but as I've said, I mean, to really move on with the traceability and standardization and transparency in it is going to be extremely important for this whole energy system to be as cost effective as it can possibly be, and that's very needed for us to really have the most cost effective systems possible to also compete in Europe with the US and with China and with other continents. It's important that we find the best possible and most cost effective way to electrify our industry and to remove carbon in our industry here.
Perfect. So sustainable, cost effective, and transparent. I think that's a very good sort
Exactly.
of summary of our conversation today. Once again, thanks a lot, Mia, for the time. It was a pleasure to have you here. I suggest everyone to look at Bodeke Partners website, so you will learn a lot there, and you can find Mia on LinkedIn as well. If you want to get in touch, follow us also on LinkedIn on his Sprichu account, and then get in touch to learn more about the important issue of energy traceability. Thanks for today, and we'll come back with more sessions.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much, Adam.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.